Hi, good evening, everybody. My topic, my essay that I read was "The New Anti-Semitism" by Melanie Phillips. The article is from a book published in 2006. I thought that was really relevant because it reads as if it was written yesterday, but it addresses the rise of a new form of anti-Semitism, which is increasingly disguised as anti-Zionism. This new form of anti-Semitism does not focus on Jews as individuals or a race, but instead targets Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, often using Holocaust-related language and themes to demonize Israel, such as the portrayal of Israel as an oppressive apartheid Nazi regime. She describes a Holocaust inversion where the Jews are demonized as Nazis and the Palestinians as the new Jews. This inversion, the article claims, is aided by propaganda in the Arab and Muslim world, which paints Jews as evil and part of a global conspiracy to control the world, whereas in reality, the Arabs desire an Islamic dictatorship of the world. Such propaganda often includes Holocaust denial and anti-Jewish rhetoric, including dehumanizing depictions of Jews as apes and pigs. The article further emphasizes how European media has promoted the idea that Israel uses Nazi tactics, making the country appear as a brutal aggressor. This has created a false equivalence between Israel's self-defense and Nazi atrocities. She also states that the left-wing political movement is also called out for embracing anti-Zionism as part of a broader anti-imperialist and anti-Western stance. Many left-wing Jews and Israelis have accepted this narrative, giving more ammunition to the anti-Semites. And I just added a note that there are a lot of podcasts featuring Melanie Phillips that you can just tune into, and it's really interesting because she has a lot of commentary on the Gaza war too.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Our other presenter today is Jackie Aaron, and she is at home, so I am going to read her summary. So, Summary of Anti-Zionist Anti-Semitism by Prager and Tolushkin. When Nazi crimes were exposed to the world, it became taboo to call oneself anti-Semitic. Soviet leaders boasted that they actually eliminated anti-Semitism, and the USSR outlined anti-Semitism in its constitution. Although the Arabs' policy was to destroy the Jewish state, they too denied being anti-Semitic. Since the exposure of the Holocaust, it seemed that the most hated of people in history no longer had enemies. People who hated Jews after the Holocaust no longer called themselves anti-Semitic, but rather anti-Zionists. Most anti-Semitics deny hating all Jews, only those that retain their Jewish national beliefs and of a Jewish state. Anti-Zionism is the first form of Jewish hatred to deny that it hates Jews. In comparing Italians and Jewish people, it is noted that if you deny Italians nationhood and any Italian rights to their homeland, then you are an enemy of the Italian people. Those who deny Jewish nationhood and the Jews' right to their state is anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionists would say the comparison of Italy and Israel is invalid because Italian has meaning as a nationality, while Judaism has meaning only as a religion. Since Judaism is only a religion and Zionism is a national movement, one can oppose Zionism without being an enemy of Jews or Judaism. This argument is false for 4 reasons. First, Judaism has believed throughout history that Jewish nationhood is, along with God, Torah, and chosenness, a pillar of Judaism. Second, the contention that anti-Zionists are not enemies of Jews is false. Third, it was possible before the establishment of Israel in 1948 to oppose the Zionist movement and not to be an enemy of the Jews. Once Israel was established, anyone pushing to destroy Israel is an enemy of the Jews. Fourth, studies have shown over 95% of American Jewry agrees with the right of Jews to a Jewish state. Therefore, anti-Zionists should be viewed by Jews as enemies. Anti-Zionists rarely draw distinctions between Zionists and Jews. The last part of the section shows examples of how poets, writers, newspapers, and various countries talk about anti-Zionism to disguise their anti-Semitism. There may be some differences in what aspects of Jewish life anti-Zionists and anti-Semitics hate, but for the Jews, the consequences are the same. Thank you to Ivan and Jackie. And now I would like to introduce our speakers. We'll start with David White, who's not actually speaking, but he's his Associate Regional Director for Jewish Outreach at ADL New York. And he works with ADL signature synagogues like ours to support education and programming in our community. And then our speaker for this evening is Sylvia Appelman, who is an associate analyst at the Center on Extremism at ADL New York/New Jersey. She is responsible for tracking extremist trends, ideologies, and groups across the political spectrum. So our presentation tonight is titled The Anti-Semitic Lineage of Anti-Zionism.
You.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. I hear we have a lot of scholars in this residence. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but you got it.
I don't think I did.
Yeah, it's too good.
Yeah, it's there.
Oh,
Oh, no,
No,
that's
this is just the regular ADL email that I got earlier today.
Oh, that's.
And from Rabbi.
oh, Jackie's okay.
The order of events for this evening.
So sorry, everyone.
We could just, this one. So it really didn't send. Okay, how about with my presenter notes?
Either way.
You guys are gonna got some spoiler alerts, I guess. So that's all good, it's all good, okay. Let me just see here, okay, we're yeah. There was another option that says. All right, everyone. Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As mentioned, my name is Sylvia Appelman, and
Yeah, very good.
I'm an associate analyst at the Center on Extremism at ADL, and as you can imagine, the last 72 hours or so have been kind of nonstop working. The second I turned my phone on after Shabbat, right, heard about Brown. Then the next day, heard about Sydney, and then there's another group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front that also had that the FBI ended up foiling a plot, and it's a group that we're familiar with. And then, yeah, it's been a little bit busy, but I couldn't think of a more appropriate time to be doing a presentation like this. So we're going to be talking about modern anti-Semitism in a post-October 7th world. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, let's move to the top. There we go. Okay, great. So we're going to be talking about the threat landscape that we're seeing right across America in particular. And as mentioned, we, of course, are having Australia in our hearts, and I am going to talk briefly about it at one point, but just want to understand that the Center on Extremism, we focus specifically on anti-Semitism in the United States. Although we do have partners in other organizations across the world, and we often share intelligence with them as well as law enforcement, not just in the US, but across the world. So there has been an unprecedentedly high threat environment for American Jews, as I'm sure everyone here is quite familiar. Just a quick show of hands, are folks familiar with our audit on anti-Semitic incidents? Yeah, okay, so every single year for the past, since 1965, ADL has been tracking anti-Semitic incidents across the country. So that includes vandalism, harassment, and assault. Those are the three bucket categories that we use. And some of these are given in through our incident response forms, which David I know works on, and we'll make sure to send you some of our resources at the end of this. And as you can imagine, and as you can see in this chart here, right, there's been a 893% increase over the last decade right? And you can see what are the years that have the most. 2023 and 2024, right? Because when something happens like October 7th, then you see a massive spike across the globe. When Jews are targeted, then you see a massive spike. And then 2024, that was also in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, and we saw an increase. And our statistics have not come out yet for 2025. That'll be available in April, but April and March, around that time. And and history, specifically assaults and vandalism. Now, as mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit briefly about extremist plots targeting Jews and Zionists. Now, does anyone recognize any of these pictures?
Pennsylvania.
You can zoom in. Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's Pennsylvania. Do you know what happened? And if you do want to explain?
Yes, someone torched the mansion that the governor lived in on the night of
Passover.
Passover.
Yeah, the
Right.
first Passover Seder.
And they were sleeping upstairs.
Yes, and Governor Josh Shapiro is Jewish, and he's a very high-profile Jewish politician. No, sorry, this zooming in over here. Does anyone notice this picture?
That one or this one? To the right?
Yeah, to the left, sorry.
Oh, no.
That is from the DC
Oh.
shooting from the two Israeli embassy staff members were murdered by Elias Rodriguez, and then in the name of freeing Palestine. And then this over here,
Is that Denver?
yes. Unfortunately, you're right. These are wow. We're just kind of having fun with PowerPoint tonight. Right. So there have been, obviously this year we've seen so many terrorist plots, just these three that have been mentioned. But what's really wild is that since January 2020, we've documented 18 terrorist plots or attacks and against Jews, Zionists, or Jewish institutions. 11 out of 17 of those happened from July 2024 to September 2025. That is unprecedented. And that's in comparison of 7 incidents that happened over from January for 4 years, essentially. So as mentioned, and again, sorry that you're seeing my notes, you can ignore those, but I know you see them, so it's okay. So as mentioned, right, this past Sunday, there was an incident at on Bonny Beach in New South Wales in Australia. At least 15 victims were killed and at least 40 more were injured. Police, so basically there were 2 individuals that opened fire in particular, and the police also disarmed 2 IEDs, which are explosive devices. So the 2 killers were a father-son duo, the Akrams, and the father was killed and one of them is still in critical condition. And the motive is still not fully determined yet, but they did allegedly pledge allegiance to ISIS. ISIS has not yet claimed responsibility for this attack. We don't know if they will. And the son, Naveed, he actually was known to Australian intelligence since I think 2019 or so, because he has close ties with an ISIS or Islamic State cell in Australia. And also we were able to identify at least one ISIS flag on the car as it drove into our team in the Center on Extremism. And again, we have not found ISIS claiming the attack yet. So with this, right, we have obviously a very high, intense national landscape and international landscape of threats against Jews. So in 2025, and I'm talking about New York statistics to a New York crowd. So as you can see, and again, we haven't published the full data set yet for 2025, but from 2023 to 2024, right, in this, you can see some a vast increase, even again, since October 7th, in all 3 categories of harassment, vandalism, and assault. So what do I mean by these categories, right? So let's talk for a second about some incidents that happened in 2025. So, for example, there was an assault of 3 individuals approached a Jewish victim and said, "Hey Jew," and they punched the victim on the head multiple times and brandished a firearm. In terms of harassment, this is really horrific. a elementary school student slideshow was hacked and it was displaying threatening and anti-Semitic messages such as "Die bitch, you deserve to fucking die, go kill yourself, and go back to Israel, haha." And for vandalism, we've seen so many incidents, but one is a subway station in Brooklyn was vandalized with swastika and "Death to the Jews" and "Kill all the Jews," right? Sometimes they try to be a little creative and give a few different options. Sorry, gallows humor, that's how we get through our days. Okay, so now that was a big zoom out of a lot of things going on, right? And I'm sure you've all been,
Can I say
Yeah.
one thing? I think what's important to point out about the data too, especially in 2023, is that 70% of the incidents that we saw happen in Q4 of 2023. So that's October to December of 2023. 800 of the 1,200 incidents in New York that we saw.
Coincidence?
No, I think not.
That was a rhetorical question.
correct. So we are going to talk about anti-Semitism, Zionism, and anti-Zionism, just to get our definitions straight. But before we dive in, I want to just get a sense from the crowd, whether you're on Zoom or here, how would you define anti-Semitism?
A baseless hatred of Jewish people or a Jewish person.
Okay, so just to repeat, so everyone can hear, a baseless hatred of Jewish people or a Jewish person. Any other ideas? Yeah,
Well, to put the Nazi definition, which is really where it started, it's classifying Jews not as a religion, but as a race. And the feelings against them not based upon what they believe, but who they are.
yeah, so also to repeat again, people who view Jews as an ethnicity or a race and not as a religion. That's what you're saying. Okay, these are good points. Let's see. So according to the Anti-Defamation League, where we work, what is anti-Semitism? It refers to prejudice, discrimination, or hostility directed at Jewish people. It is generally based on negative stereotypes, myths, or misinformation about Jews, Judaism, or Jewish identity. So on our website, we have, if you go to antisemitism.adl.org, and I'm also happy to send links afterwards, we have a really great resource called Anti-Semitism Uncovered, where we go through different tropes and themes throughout Jewish history about anti-Semitism. So, and again, I know I'm talking to a room of experts who've been learning this course all year, but I just wanted to touch on a few examples that we've seen throughout Jewish history, and then we're going to talk about how they tie into anti-Zionism when we got there. But again, I want this to be as collaborative as possible because I could talk and talk and talk, but you guys are more interesting. So we're going to go through a few different examples here. One, the idea of Jewish power. Any ideas on how that could be anti-Semitic or what that trope is? Yeah.
Well, the trope is that the Jewish bankers are controlling the capitalist system and putting down the workers. And the Bolsheviks also controlled by the Jews.
Yes, the capitalists and the anti-capitalists are all controlled by the Jews.
Revolution, which will also
Capitalist and
mess up the word.
Yeah, exactly. So, right, so it's the idea that Jews are in charge of everything, and in particular the banks, which you're skipping ahead. We didn't even get up to greed yet. But that is a really common trope, right? Jews are in charge of our institutions, financial, political. Yeah.
Well, one is that the Jews created Christianity.
Jews created Christianity.
The power, the natural power of especially the German race.
To pollute the Germans. Interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of different examples of power. Or we could also, I could just read all of these and you guys can all chime in on what trope you find most interesting that you have examples of, right? So we have power, we have disloyalty, greed, deicide, blood, Holocaust denial. And the last one's anti-Zionism, but we're going to save that for the other slides. So out of all of these examples, and I'm happy to repeat them in case it's too small, I could also zoom in. Hold on. Anyone think of any examples that come to mind? or recognize any of the pictures or any of the individuals in the pictures?
You got a room full of people who recognize a lot of this stuff. We just aren't all leaping in to say so.
You just what?
We're just not all leaping in to say so, but we've taken this course. So a lot of this is really familiar and we're just hesitant to jump in. But we're engaged and we know what this.
Okay, okay.
I'm just trying to explain why you're having trouble getting responses. It's because we know, we just don't know how to jump in.
Okay.
Shell shocked.
Yeah.
I have just like, who's the Holocaust denial picture?
Anyone know?
David Irving.
Yes, David Irving. Now, anyone know who David, yeah, sorry if it's out, yeah, do you wanna explain who he is?
Well, he was a world famous historian. Who essentially created an alternate history of the Nazis and essentially claimed that 6 million weren't killed, but if there were Jews that were killed, they died by natural causes, by self-caused and self-harm, etc. I believe he was also the defendant for a major legal case of libel in the British courts with what's her name?
Deborah Lipstadt,
Deborah Lipstadt.
former,
Sued her for
yes, he sued her for libel, so,
she ripped them apart.
yeah, she destroyed him. Highly recommend watching the movie Denial.
Very good.
Ooh, so good. Great Tisha B'Av movie, if that's your kind of thing, watching sad movies, or relevant movies, because I think the ending in my mind was happy, but,
It's called Denial.
Denial. I believe Rachel Weisz is in it, right?
Yeah.
Rachel Weisz, great cast. So again, just to quickly summarize, David Irving, right? He is kind of like one of, not the original Holocaust denier, but a very prolific man in Holocaust denial, and he is still alive somehow. He's quite old. And what's really interesting, right? So something that we've noticed that someone was speaking before who just presented, right? That in Arabic or Islamic countries, sometimes there is a lot of Holocaust denial as well, and so the Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of Iran, he hosted a Holocaust denial conference, and David Irving was someone who showed up to that. And what's really, really scary and interesting is, are folks familiar with Nick Fuentes?
Yes.
We are now.
So we are now, no, I'm telling you. So right, so he's white supremacist. I think he's younger than me, honestly, and I'm pretty young. But he is white supremacist who's, you know, gone through as Holocaust denier. And a lot of the language that he uses is very, very similar to David Irving. And just to see the parallels is pretty jarring, and also using anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian rhetoric to couch some Holocaust denial, which again is very odd. And it's like when white supremacists try to make themselves seem more palpable, right? Palatable, by showing, look, I'm with the times. I believe that, you know, I support these causes, but we'll get to how white supremacists have approached anti-Zionism actually at the end. But yeah.
Didn't a certain pretty famous TV personality that was fired from Fox
Tucker Carlson hosted Nick Fuentes.
give him quite a stage performance?
Correct. The New York Times platformed him. A lot of people have been platforming Nick Fuentes, and it's been of grave concern to the ADL. We've called it out, and we've been working with our partners about this. He also just appeared on Piers Morgan recently. But yeah, Tucker Carlson gave him a pretty uncritical interview, we should put it that way. And with Piers Morgan, he did push him on many topics, but still is dangerous to see a white supremacist platformed on mainstream outlets. Okay, so since you're all experts, we can go to. Oh, sorry, there's another question? Yeah.
Can you speak to the ADL position on deicide and what certain parts of certain organizations still propagandize with that focus?
Yeah, so deicide, the idea that, right, the Jews killed Jesus. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I realize we didn't define those terms. Are you referring, do you want to be explicit in what you're saying? Because I'm super open to talking about that. Like,
I mean.
like Tucker Carlson in particular?
No, well, the Catholic Church formally before 63. There's I think it's a part of the Baptist Church that Vice President Vance and maybe Speaker Johnson have attended.
We've called that out. We have called that out.
So, yeah, there is a history within.
What does that mean that you've called it out? Can you explain that term, please?
It means we've condemned it. We've used our platform to condemn it.
Written letters, etc. Just a quick word on traditionalist Catholics, right? It's not representative of Catholicism in general. It's the idea of supersessionism, separate sect within Catholicism that has propagated this belief that the Jews killed Jesus and has been condemned, like you were saying before, a while back, and also like the more recent popes have also very much disavowed it. And ADL also works with Catholic partners on this issue, and it's something we've written extensively about. I'm happy to share resources because we do not support the idea that the Jews killed Jesus and that, you know, the anti-Semitism that comes out of it. But I really want to get to tonight's bread and butter, which is anti-Zionism, as I'm sure everyone is so excited to talk about. Okay, first, so we got to define some terms here, right? And this comes from ADL's, this is our own definitions. So Zionism is the movement for the self-determination and statehood of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. And it is central to Jewish identity. Very straightforward, nothing to do with Israeli policy, not even about necessarily how Zionism relates to Palestinians, just the idea of Jewish self-determination. And anti-Zionism, again, as defined by the ADL, is the opposite, which is rejecting Israel's right to exist and singling out the Jewish state and Jewish people's right to self-determination and disconnecting Judaism, Jewish history from the land, essentially. And I know these like words are words. There's a lot to unpack within these words, and happy to take questions now or ideas or thoughts of how we feel about these definitions, or we could keep going and explore more. Oh, we got some questions. Yeah, please.
Does how the Israelis and the Zionists behave matter as far as whether or not people accept Zionism or not?
Does how Israelis behave matter as to whether people accept Zionism? As in
what do they do, like what they did after the October massacre?
You're saying that people who identify as anti-Zionists.
Yeah, do they justify themselves by the behavior?
By the behavior of
the
Israelis. Yeah, there definitely are anti-Zionists who will say, right, like they will say Israel, let's say, is committing genocide is one of the claims. Therefore, we have every right to protest, which sometimes is genuine First Amendment protected protest. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's killing 2 people in DC. But definitely in terms of speaking from an ideological perspective, right, using that as justification, and we're going to actually talk about how anti-Zionists view Zionism in the next slide. But so, yeah.
Well, part of the anger, supposedly justifiable, anger against the Jews near the West Bank and Gaza has to do with the desire to recapture land and remove Jews from that piece of property. So when that was agreed to, I don't have to remind everybody here, I'm just saying it so that we hear it again. And I forget which settlement was completely wiped out by the IDF removing everyone from the settlement. Yes. Which one?
Gush Katif.
Gush Katif, that's the right.
Yeah.
Removing everyone, tearing the buildings down.
Okay.
Here, peace for peace. Here's a piece of land. We're out of here. It's all yours. So tell me, did it bring peace? Did it bring peace? Was there any improvement?
Right, so this is an example,
A
right?
rhetorical question.
Yeah, no, rhetorical, and also an example of right, like, being able to criticize Israeli policy in a genuine way that does not veer into anti-Semitism, which is what you were just doing. Good job. No, right, but like that's an example of like what we're talking about.
What I'm trying to say is that even when Israel fulfills the wish list, it's turned against them.
Oh, I see what you're saying, right, even when, yeah. But let's keep going, let's keep going. Oh, wait, oh, there was a few more hands.
Do you have something?
Right.
Great.
Yeah, well, I to take the other side of that question. Does the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state mean that it would have the right to expel 20% of its population that's Palestinian? In other words, what is the definition?
Right, what does that
of a
mean?
Jewish state, and what in that Jewish state are the rights of other people who do exist?
Right, that's an excellent question. No, I agree, and that's an excellent question, and I think that's something that many people that are in the Zionist camp do grapple with and do discuss, right? Like, what does it mean to exist as a Jewish and democratic state? What does a two-state solution look like? What about Gush Katif? These are all really genuine questions, and the question of right to exist, like, what does that mean? I don't know. Do I have a right to exist? I feel like it's a phrase we throw out so much, right? Like, what does that even mean? And I think we're gonna discuss it. But
To me, the most anti-Zionist wants to expel the Arabs.
No, I didn't say they want.
no, I think he's asking it in a theoretical, right? And also, let's not talk, we could also. Right, and Zionism also, just to be clear, this is something that has existed for generations before the founding of the state of Israel, before, you know, Ben Gvir and Bibi Netanyahu were even born. So, right, these are ideas that, you know, we're talking much further out. I mean, someone in the back had a question for a bit. Yeah, you.
Sure, I mean, it's a minority belief, but I feel like you're leaving out post-Zionism, right? Which is the idea that Israel exists, it's no longer a question. The question is, what is Israel going to be like? Because whether or not Israel should exist or shouldn't exist, it does exist.
Yeah.
And the question is not, should it? The question is, what is Israel going to be and how is it going to treat the people in its borders? And I feel like that is a legitimate, real position that in the continuum of two that you guys have right now doesn't have a place.
Good, thank you for expressing, yeah.
So what, to me, the biggest example of anti-Zionism is that the fact that every country makes Israel have different way of hold up to a different standard. That's what I'm trying to say. To me, that's anti-Semitic, that and I know that Jews, we want Israel to be on a high level, but it's filled with people and people are human. And we're being held to a higher standard, which is not fair, and to me, that's anti-Semitic.
Yeah, so this idea, right, of double standard that's been applied, some of you might be familiar with Natan Sharansky, his 3D test on when anti-Israel becomes anti-Semitic. It's actually, it's a question from an ideological perspective that's been debated of what does it mean to have a double standard? Like, are we measuring every single UN resolution, or at least for myself, right? Like I went to NYU, quite a poppin' place. And I was there before October 7th. I'm not that young. And that's something where I felt everyone was calling out everything all the time, right? Not just Israel, but also China and also other countries. So I think, and especially in the age of information, right, where people are posting nonstop on social media, how do you measure if there's a double standard or not? I think maybe an example could be Eurovision, right? Like Israel getting boycotted out of Eurovision. Then also the question, right, of like, legitimate political protest versus illegitimate political protest. And you know, we haven't even gotten to the juicy stuff, but I do want to play last question and then we'll move on.
Well, I always thought that when you say apartheid, that's applied to the areas that Israel occupies, not to Israel itself. So I was in Hebron.
Right.
And to reach water, if you lived in the Arab part of Hebron, you had to walk a good hour. if you're in the Israeli part of Hebron, everything was at your beck and call. To me, that's apartheid. And really, you have to be honest about what we're talking about. In Israel itself, there's really no apartheid.
Right, so we could discuss apartheid. It's a good question, and I think, you know, when we are dealing with anti-Semitic incidents, right, we don't call everyone who's using the phrase genocide or apartheid, we don't call that anti-Semitic, because it's a little bit more complicated than specifically words, right? And then, like you're saying, there's a difference between talking about the West Bank versus Israel proper versus there's a lot of complicated issues here. But I will say, though, back to this idea of double standard, or right, when you're using those words to create kind of they're buzzwords, right? It's a way to kind of create buzz about the topic. But then it's important to have like real deeper conversations, right? What's this other person saying to you? Are they saying that, you know, do they understand what apartheid means and not trying to understand, right? Like, what are the human rights potential violations that they're discussing here? But again, there's so much to unpack with Zionism and anti-Zionism, and I just want to be able, we don't have so much time, so let's keep going. Okay, great. So I also wanted to bring in a definition of Zionism by one of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. I don't know if you could really read that. There we go. Is anyone able to read it out loud? I know it's kind of tiny. No, we can keep going, but he has a really nice definition of Zionism. I recommend you look it up in his book, Future Tense. Okay, so now let's focus on, specifically, we're talking about the extreme anti-Zionist movement. I'm talking about, and you're going to see exactly what I mean in a second. So in this idea of Zionism, David Miller, who is a anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist based in the UK, he says genocide is baked into Zionist ideology, and there is no Zionism which will not be required to genocide the Palestinians, which is maybe similar to what some you were asking about before, but right, it's this idea that Zionism is not about Jewish self-determination, it's not about Jewish safety, it's about killing. Or Lami Steek, who is a New York-based lawyer, also a very prolific leader in the anti-Israel movement in the United States. Zionism is the greatest evil, sadism, supremacy, right? Using the word sadism, or we've seen people use like Satanism, that kind of reminds us of some tropes. And again, Muhammad al-Kurd, another famous anti-Zionist in this world, Zionism is a death cult. So when this criticism of Israel crossed the line into anti-Semitism, right, we were just saying that, as we were just doing, we're just criticizing some policies, right, in this room, right? But when it questions the country's existence, kind of what this person in the back was saying before about, right, not talking about post-Zionism, talking about, oh, should Israel be here, should it not be here? Or saying that, you know, there's no, Jews have no connections to the land, they weren't here. That's when it gets into the bad territory. So when does anti-Israel rhetoric cross line into anti-Semitism? As I was just talking about, I wanted to show you guys some examples that we have seen at anti-Israel protests across the country since October 7th. So this here, I'll zoom in. Can anyone make that out? Anyone see what that says? Zionism is racism.
There's dollar bills.
And those are dollar bills. And what are the dollar bills in the shape of?
S.
A snake. And if you zoom in, you see more dollar bills and a little bit of blood. So, right, you've got a lot of different tropes here. So the phrase itself, Zionism is racism, I feel like it's something we hear every other day. And if you're talking, right, like just the conversation we were having, that if you ask someone, what do you mean by Zionism is racism? Are you saying that Ben Gvir is saying racist things? If you're saying that, I agree with you. And ABL is calling that out. But if you're saying Zionism is racism and you have the money and the snake, I mean, we know where this is headed. Okay, another example over here. What is that? Sorry, and also apologies in advance for some of the things that we're going to be showing. These are some of the least graphic of the images we have seen, right? Anyone want to describe what that is?
Blood libel.
It's a blood libel. right? So Bibi Netanyahu is drinking the blood of the babies in Gaza and being held by Joe Biden. So again, this is before Trump, or after for Trump 1 and before Trump 2. And we got the money, but the money is being applied to Biden. And also this is very hard to make out, but there is a little armband with a Jewish star. And that, on the one hand, oh, maybe it's referring to an Israeli flag, but that doesn't necessarily look like an Israeli flag. It looks like this could be potentially a Holocaust reference to Jews wearing stars. Okay. This is another great one. But when I say great, I don't mean it's a good thing. I mean, it's a great example of showing anti-Semitism. Well done, Zionists. Hitler would be proud. What do we see here? Do we see what is dripping? Blood, right? It's a little bit of a blood libel. And this idea, right, of like Jewish guilt, you should have learned your lesson. The oppressed have now become the oppressors. And the line I like to use is your victim card has expired, right? Like it's Hitler's proud of you. And that's different than saying genocide, right? Like sometimes, the arguments that I've heard about genocide is, oh, you're making a reference to the Holocaust. You're trying to, get people to be guilty, to feel guilty. But this is like an explicit reference of trying to make someone guilty about the Holocaust. And okay. This one is like, right, unity in confronting Zionism, and we see another snake over here. So the idea of confronting Zionism is something we need to dismantle and confront because it's a bad thing in our society. We need to eliminate and so there was a speech here by a professor, I think she was a worker at a university, saying, do the Zionists own the university? That reminds us a little bit of tropes about power, about money, right? You could criticize, say maybe she's criticizing school policy towards funding weapons companies in their endowment, right? But when you're using language like Zionists owning university, it harkens back to old tropes. And over here, and we're about to get to this in the next slide, but anyone recognize this individual? Who?
It looks like Mads Mikkelsen.
No. I was like, can I hear Nicholson? No.
The journalist that was killed in the West Bank.
No. This is supposed to be Layla Khalid. Or is anyone familiar with Layla Khalid? So she was a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. She still is. She's still kicking, living in Jordan, which is a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization. And that group was responsible, especially in the 70s, for hijacking a bunch of planes. She hijacked one plane, and then she got facial reconstructive surgery and hijacked another plane. So, and again, a little bit of gallows humor, but she knows how to hustle. And anyway, so she has kind of been revered in the anti-Zionist movement in the more extreme sects as a feminist icon because she is a resistor. She's someone who did this. Actually, something interesting I was just talking about with friends, and I think you all at a synagogue would appreciate this. Are folks familiar with Rabbi Hutner, Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak? No. He's a historically famous Jewish American rabbi, and he was actually on one of the hijacked planes, but not the one that she hijacked. But they didn't tell the terrorists that there's an important rabbi here, and it's like the craziest story of all time. Anyway, I just think it's wild. So, okay, we got some examples here. So now, so one of the things I particularly focus on and I research on is designated foreign terrorist organizations, especially designated terrorists, and how people in the anti-Israel movement in the United States venerate them, like Layla Khalid, as we just showed. But we don't have to go through, so I'm also just want to keep an eye on time.
8:30 when we're done, so that includes
questions. Oh, wow. Okay, we're gonna zoom. So I'm just gonna put some on here. It's a really fun slideshow. Anyone recognize? I know it's tiny. Anyone recognize any of these symbols? Move the smaller. Oh crap! Sorry. Or words, symbols. Intifada. Right. So the word intifada in Arabic literally translates to the shaking off, and colloquially it's used as revolution, right? Like Viva la Revolución, globalize the intifada. It's this idea. But the intifada was also referred to in two different periods of Israeli history where there were bus bombings. and car bombings done by foreign terrorist organizations in which many Israelis were killed and Jewish people were killed. So this is kind of an example of intent versus impact, right? When someone might be intending to use the word intifada in the sense of, oh, I just mean a revolution, but when you pair it with an inverted red triangle, which is a symbol that Hamas uses to designate its targets, and similarly using long live the resistance, and similarly holding a Hamas flag, then the intent may not be so innocent after all. In addition, here's a leader in the anti-Israel protest movement. She's wearing a pin of Abu Obeidah, who's a spokesman of Hamas. She was wearing this outside of a synagogue in Teaneck, New Jersey. This is from an encampment at Princeton University. That's a Hezbollah flag and a guitar. It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. And some other flags. So Yahya Sinwar, who was one of the architects of October 7th. And again, we've seen this is in New York. But he was a martyr. Wow. Yeah. Didn't know we had such a radical crew over here. And over here, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was an act of decolonization. So this was like a pamphlet that was handed out in New York, and this one was not in Columbia. This was a different one, but they're also the actual original Hamas manifesto was printed out and handed out at Columbia University. And I'm sorry that my laptop is having a day. Right, so and just there's 2 points I want to make here, and maybe this kind of goes back to the post-Zionism conversation we were having. Within certain leftist or extreme left groups, there's this idea of decolonization, this idea that, you know, no land belongs to anyone and it's important. And even though, yes, maybe the atrocities of October 7th, they were horrible, at the end of the day, people were fighting in support of resistance, and what they did was justified because now the land deserves to go back to who they perceive had it originally. So there is one branch that is a little, quote, less radical, where they're like, we condemn violence, but this is a necessary act. That the phrase that's used is decolonization is not a metaphor. It's a phrase that's used. One second. And then the further one is this, I would say, what we call the veneration of terrorists, right? Wearing a face of their pins on you and saying that October 7th was the best day ever, and saying things like Al-Qassam, which is the name of Hamas's armed wing. Al-Qassam, make us proud, shoot another soldier down. Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, turn another ship around. Lots of like chants in support. Actually, one university, they made up a song about Layla Khalid and they sang it together. Right, so there's a difference, and again, both branches are bad. It's not good to celebrate terrorism or to say it was justified, but there are 2 different, one's a bit more explicitly supportive of violence and one's less. Okay. So wait, do you have a question?
I actually have a comment, which was, I find it difficult, a tremendous difficult stretch of one's imagination to find any excuse to shoot a baby in a crib. It's what was the baby was going to pee on you? What was the reason?
No, it's apparent because there are individuals within this movement. So some might be familiar with Hassan Piker, who's a streamer on Twitch. You're familiar? And one thing he said, the very, very beginning, like October 2023, he was in a debate with this guy, Ethan Klein, who's, no, I'm gonna call him a Zion. I don't know if he identifies as a Zionist. Yeah, I'm quite familiar. I'm asked about this all the time. I unfortunately had to learn a whole lot about podcast bros in the last 2 years. A lot more information that I wish I did not know. But anyway, Hassan Piker, they were in a debate, and he said, and this man has millions of followers all over social media. He's been profiled by the New Yorker and all the different things, been given awards. He said that, yeah, babies are settlers, even babies are settlers. And that's and they're legitimate targets, right? Like that's
Has he revisited that as months have passed by?
I have not heard him he has revisited his 9/11 comments. Oh yeah, he also said that he has a lot of comments. He did apologize 9/11. I don't think I've heard him apologize about the babies. And he has since he hosted someone who he thought was a Houthi, but it turns out he wasn't really a Houthi. And yeah, on his podcast, he hosted a Yemenite pirate. It's not officially a Houthi, and now that Houthi is suing, the non-Houthi is suing for defamation of people who called him a Houthi. Yeah,
You can't make this.
really, the world, my job is so entertaining. As horrible as it is, it keeps me young. Okay, so I'm just gonna show, I mean, this might be more, the other stuff we were talking about seems there's more interest, but I wanted to show how, oh, someone had a comment in the chat, I did not realize. Oh, they lost the picture and they'll leave Zoom and come again.
All right, no, I'm not.
Okay, cool. Sorry for that person. But okay, anyway, so we're gonna talk really quickly again about anti-Semitic incidents in New York, or across the United States, but I want to focus on New York because that's relevant to everyone here. And as you can see in my interesting side notes, this is not representative of left-wing versus right-wing incidents, like left-wing inspired versus right-wing inspired. This is just a sampling to show some of the tropes. Some will be related to Zionism, some won't be. And also, again, apologies in advance for some of the language you might see or hear because this is not pleasant as Jewish people to listen to. Okay. So this over here, San Francisco Hillel, someone graffitied the word Chaybar. Does anyone know what Chaybar refers to? Okay, so Chaybar is, there is a phrase called Chaybar Yayahud, which is the first verse of an anti-Semitic chant, and refers to a battle fought in 628 CE in the Chaybar Oasis, where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have accused the Jews of living in Chaybar of conspiring with other Jewish tribes, and then use that accusation as an excuse to massacre the Jewish population there. So even if, let's say, the story didn't happen, Muhammad didn't accuse the Jews of this, right? It has been taken and weaponized in a way to express violence against Jews. And this idea, right, of the accusation of Jews conspiring with each other, what does that kind of sound like? Like the disloyalty idea, right? It's this idea that, Jews are only loyal to each other and that they don't, whether it's the United States of America or whether it's the Chaybar Oasis, that they don't contribute to broader society. This over here is Park East, and unfortunately Park East has had its fair share of incidents in the last year, 2 years. Over here, somebody wrote the word, so it says, "How great are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel." Anyone recognize that sentence?
Yes.
Sure.
It's Matovu.
Yeah,
Matovu Halacha Yaakov, Mishnot Techa Yisrael. Also, I'm Orthodox. Sorry, I should have prefaced that. So we have some other references.
And I knew there.
Yeah, I don't know if it just in terms of my other things. So when we first saw this incident, it's interesting because the phrase putting Palestine, okay, like that's not, the word Palestine is not anti-Semitic. But when you're graffitiing on a synagogue, the word Palestine, or in this instance, the Chabad of Sherman Oaks, California, Free Gaza, what you're doing is you're holding a Jewish institution responsible for what's going on in Israel and Gaza. The words themselves, Free Gaza, Free Palestine, not anti-Semitic. But when you graffiti, first of all, graffitiing something on a synagogue, probably not the best idea, and within itself, whatever it says is horrible. But when you're using language that's saying, "Oh, you guys actually, everyone in this room is maybe Netanyahu, or everyone in this room is the IDF," right? That's when you're casting blame and you're making Jewish people targets. And we've seen a lot of that actually in response to the attack in Australia, right? People have been saying, "Good, they deserved it." The Zionists, even though again it was a Chabad event, and Chabad brings all walks of life, saying people deserved it, or whatever, they're all responsible. No Jewish person is blame free for what's happening in Gaza. Okay, so those are some examples. And now we're going to talk about some examples of vandalism and harassment, specifically in the more anti-Zionist thing. So in Brooklyn in June of 2024, does anyone remember this incident? I think it got pretty high profile news, but there was a music venue in Bushwick where someone graffitied or wrote "Zionists can't make jazz" on an Israeli-owned jazz club. Ooh, wow, roasted, I guess. Wow, so mean. And put it on, I'm sorry, like they could be better than that. Like, you can't make jazz. Watch me make jazz. And they put it on a fence with permanent marker, and then so that's one aspect. Hey, graffiti, we see that all the time. But then they poured buckets of red paint on people lining in to go to the club. And then later in Brooklyn, a few months later, actually no, over here, you see, anyone familiar with Anne Pasternak? Ever heard of her?
Who?
Anne Pasternak. She's on the board, she's Jewish, she's on the board for the Brooklyn Museum. And they said she's a white supremacist Zionist, and they have these red triangles, which again, some are the Hamas symbols.
Ever gone to the Brooklyn Museum?
I actually have not gone, but it's on my list.
How anybody could call that place anti-black,
Yeah,
racist.
and there's a lot of people are celebrating all cultures. It's pretty wild. So they went to, this is an escalation, because this one, obviously protesting or vandalizing a museum is horrific, but going to the board member's house and actually doing that, and then in the example below is of the house of Cass of Columbia University administrator, and also put some red triangles on his door.
Cass is the chief operating officer in Columbia. And last year, his apartment was targeted with red paint right after a decision was made to discipline students who had been involved in some of the protests.
Yeah, it was quite horrific. So there's this idea in some anti-Zionist spaces of anti-normalization, which is the idea that, I need someone no pressure, but do you want to explain what anti-normalization is?
No.
Okay, great. Fair enough to quote David. Anti-normalization is this idea, kind of like what I was just saying about Australia, that that you should not do any business, cooperation, socializing with anyone who you perceive to be involved in what's happening in Gaza or in pejoratively Zionists, right? Don't normalize with Zionists, whether it's, there's some people who are, okay, let's boycott, it's the BDS movement, right? Okay, maybe let's boycott Sabra hummus, but in some cases it's let's go to people's houses and vandalize them, and because we should not be cooperating with them at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a women's march. and
Yeah,
the
women's march.
Israeli women who wanted to march in support of the ban. Because
Not
they
just
were
Israeli,
Yes.
Jewish American.
Jewish women were, yes,
People who identified as Jewish was banned.
yes. So yeah, there were definitely very, it was very, yeah, that was actually before my time at ADL, but it was definitely a scary time. Was this a question? Sorry.
How is that different from BDS, the BDS movement?
So that's a good question. How, like you're saying, anti-normalization. So anti-normalization is actually one of the facets of the BDS movement. Go to their website, you'll find it. Find a whole beautiful, very long page getting into very radical rhetoric of pretty much what we're seeing. But again, I think there is, in a way, BDS is protected by the First Amendment. Again, depending on what exactly you're doing. Going to someone's house and vandalizing it because they're a Zionist is not part of the First Amendment. But certain things you choose not to buy from Israeli companies, that's one thing. But again, this idea of anti-normalization is a bedrock of part of BDS. And the examples that I've shown are what we've seen in the extreme end of BDS, right? So it's one thing to boycott Sabra hummus, it's another thing to harass people. And say there's also been a lot of calls to cut ties with Hillel, which is on the university. They actually have a banner that says Hillel go to hell with an inverted red triangle, the Hamas symbol in the little eye of Hillel. I was very involved in my own school's Hillel. I find this repulsive as any other human being should. There's some people on campus boycotting specifically the presence of IDF soldiers, which one could understand, right? If you're against the war and someone's a soldier from war. I was just talking about this with some coworkers today of one of our coworkers gave an in-house presentation about campus anti-Israel stuff. And I was saying I wonder if, during, with Vietnam, a lot of people, someone made the point that during the Vietnam War, people would spit on veterans who fought in the war, right? So we've seen this kind of anti-soldier, not warranted mentality before, but they're boycotting that. But there's also people who boycotted hostages coming to campus. They boycotted really anyone they perceive as Zionist. So that's where it's BDS. Well, we always say we say it's the floor, it's not the ceiling. People think, BDS is the worst thing that anyone in the anti-Zionist movement could do, but it's just the surface.
And isn't that, just to follow up, isn't normalization today more around in different areas? And I'll just, my personal
Yeah.
bring in politics. Trump, every time I think he can't do anything worse, and I go like this, and I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for America and democracy and everything that I grew up to believe in. And he comes out and does one up on it. That's normalization. So maybe it's more than just the Zionist factor. Maybe we're all getting overly bombarded with misinformation. And it's very, very difficult today to know what is really true.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Lots of misinformation, and especially with AI, which I didn't even put a slide in AI. We don't even want to go there, trust me. But I actually have a great, if you are all interested, I have another coworker who does excellent work on misinformation, disinformation. She has her own slideshows. Happy to connect you with her. She did a test on us. Can you tell what's AI? I think we all failed.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
I have a concern, a real serious concern, and it does border a little bit on a prejudice because I am a Zionist. There.
Whoa, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that out loud.
I said it out loud. The
Whoa.
point, there is so much discrimination against Israeli artists,
Yes,
writers, singers, sports stars,
yeah,
that I really feel it's important for us as Jews to stand with them and not say, well, yeah, it's true, that one served in the army.
right,
Bullshit. Everybody serves in the army in Israel.
Oh, that's.
yeah,
They have to.
and
And if they didn't, there'd be no Israel anymore. So, which is probably what they want. And sometimes have to in a case of emergency. We're in, and this is a red alert.
agreed,
This is not a hint of a problem. We're in full red alert right now.
yeah,
We have to stand with them,
Yeah.
seriously, and fight for the rights for the authors to get published, for the books to be printed, for the books to be imported here, for them to be able to have speaking engagements.
Yeah.
It,
no, I think no, it's a great point about like anti-normalization of how it ends up just, you're just boycotting Jews. Like that's kind of what it ends up being. And it's hard to say that because when you're talking in the theory and oh, is it really anti-Zionist? Is it really criticism? At the end of the day, like what we're seeing is, Jews are not able to go into certain things because, and I think, that's also my personal opinion, just putting that out there, not part of the presentation, but it's really, and also what's very interesting is we've seen a lot of the really extreme end of the anti-Zionist movement, which is where I look. People say things like, what's his name? Like Edward Said is a Zionist. I'm like, what are you saying? He's like Palestinian, very famous Palestinian academic. Like he's a Zionist. Or like every left-wing Israeli, they're all Zionists. Like everything I don't like is a Zionist. It just becomes the new slur. It's a new slur. So there's a level of ridiculousness. It's like, what are we saying here?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, we're almost done. So we're all good. Okay. So speaking of Zionists, and kill all Zionists in California. To spruce it up, kill every Zionist. And this is an incident from Cornell University. Some folks might remember at the beginning of the war, October 2023, someone posted on an anonymous student platform, Jewish people need to be killed. If you see a Jewish person, they put person in quotes, because again, dehumanization, follow them home and slit their throats. Rats need to be eliminated from Cornell. And the FBI got involved and the person was detained. Thank God everyone was saved. But yeah, this is the reality. Okay, vandalism and harassment. So some examples of classic anti-Semitic tropes. Someone earlier mentioned, right, this idea of Jews owning the banks. Well, guess what? somebody on a subway decided that Jews own the banks to keep you poor goyim, right? And what is the word goyim? It means not someone who's not Jewish. And if I think you guys, did you guys read the protocols of the elders of Zion for this class? But you're familiar with. Yeah, we know the idea. So this idea, the word goyim is something that, right, it's Yiddish, or it's actually Hebrew, that literally means nations. But non-Jewish people, I mean, anti-Semitic people have taken this word and said, oh, this is the word that Jews use to describe us, so let's use it as like our own little nickname, and let's turn it into this slur. So, right, so there's the ADL, as you know, there's a group called the GDL, the Goyim Defense League, and they are one of the most prolific white supremacist groups in the country. And they actually have a website called Goyim TV. Don't go on that website, please don't. We have some white supremacist examples later. Another example, Hail Hitler, kikes own all. So here we see an example of Jews owning things. And also, poor kids do not know, or whoever, they don't know how to spell Heil. You know, not everyone's perfect. I have so many, sorry, we need a laugh. We all could use a laugh after this week, am I right? Yeah, hell. I mean, maybe they're supporting, it sounds like either way they're supporting Hitler. Probably not a good idea. This is a crazy thing, and we actually just published about this in our newsletter called Extremely. This is in Stuyvesant High School, which is like a very elite high school, so I've been told, in New York City. So I'm just going to describe this because it's easier this way. So this is supposed to be a soy jack meme, which is like, if you're someone who's very online, it's just a meme that happens online, and they have him wearing a little hat. Now, little hats are, it's not letting me do pointer and zoom in. Little hats is a slur used against Jews to refer to yarmulkes, kippahs, so they literally drew a little hat. Obviously gave him a nice little nose. And this woman saying 6 million pizzas, I think it says Rev, we can only do 271K. So speaking of Holocaust denial, right? One of the ideas is that it's not 6 million Jews, but it was 271,000 that were killed. So, and the idea of 6 million pizzas, has anyone heard that trope before? No. So speaking of our new best friend, Nick Fuentes, this is something that he also helped popularize, but it existed before. In Holocaust denial, there's this idea that there's no way imagine you need to cook 6 million pizzas. How long would that take you? There's no way it would take that many years. And obviously that's also a reference to ovens, and it's horrific, disgusting. So in response, she's like, sorry, I can't help you out. He goes, oy vey, which again, you know, we as Jews use that phrase often, but anti-Semites use that phrase to make fun of Jews. Stop noticing. Has anyone heard the phrase noticing before? So it's this idea that, again, part of the non-Jews, or the anti-Semites in particular, sorry, I mean non-Jewish anti-Semites, that they're noticing that Jews are controlling everything, right? They're noticing that Jews are involved, but instead of writing out on social media where they could get banned, hi, I think the Jews control everything, they say, oh, it's the noticing, I'm noticing. And so from this just one picture, and there's another graffiti in the same style with other crazy stuff, you can tell the profile of whoever did this is someone who's very much on the internet spaces that are very anti-Semitic, because in order to get these references, you really need to be deeply entrenched. Because even as the anti-Semitism scholars in this room, right? Like before I got to ADL, I didn't know what the noticing was, right? But it's someone who's very steeped in this culture. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Did you mention Stuyvesant High School? Is that?
Yes, that's where it happened.
So, when Stuyvesant High School was mostly Jewish, okay, when I went to school, what would anyone have said if substitute Schwarzer, substitute whatever you want to do, it would.
People said slurs. People would, yeah.
It would be on fire.
It would be crazy. It would be crazy. And
this is so nauseating. I'm listening to this.
Sorry.
Substitute any group. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the Women's March.
It's like double standard.
The Women's March was fabulous. It was great. Second year, I sign up. Woman in a hijab starts questioning me before I can sign up.
I'm sorry.
you have to deny the state of Israel if you want to march.
Yeah,
In the Women's March the second year.
that's horrific.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I know I am so sorry for your experiences. We've all had them. I just wanted to, we have 15 minutes left. We got it.
I'll take 1 minute.
Okay.
This killed me. I never saw Selma, the movie.
Oh, Selma, it's really good.
When it was out. So I watched it on Netflix with my husband. And you know when Martin Luther King and their group were crossing the bridge, who was standing next to him?
Rabbi Heschel.
Okay, Herschel. And did you see in the movie who was standing next to him? It was not a rabbi.
Oh,
It was not. It was a guy with one of these sort of, I don't know, Turkish hats or whatever. It was definitely not a rabbi. They
Wow.
completely rewrote history. I don't know how you didn't hear me wherever you were living, because I screamed like.
oh, that's you. Oh,
Me. They totally rewrote history.
I know.
Look at
There's a
it,
children's
get the
book,
movie and look at
there's
it
a
again.
children's book that was rewritten. It had cartoons like illustrated, and the rabbi was there. When it was reprinted, he was not there. In Great Neck High Schools. If you
Yeah.
buy the second edition, he's wiped out.
So, yes.
Sorry.
So no, you guys are so great. It's also nice because obviously as someone very deeply entrenched in this space, sometimes I'm like, am I going crazy or is this really bad? So it's nice to feel validated. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about white supremacist activity after October 7th. Which I know this is more about anti-Zionism, but I want to talk about the way in which they kind of have appropriated anti-Zionism. We've heard of a few cases of white supremacist groups actually showing up at pro-Palestine marches and like handing out propaganda. Very few cases, but it has happened. But as you can see here, so this is Thomas Rousseau. He is the leader of one of the most prolific white supremacist groups, Patriot Front. He has a whole sign that says Zionists out of government, or there's another phrase that white supremacists like to use a lot called ZOG, Z-O-G, which stands for Zionist Occupied Government. So again, here, when white supremacist says the word Zionist, it's very clear that they're referring to Jews. They're not trying to couch it, right? It's not like a left-wing person trying to say, oh, I don't think Zionism. Here, right, Jews love genocide, right? It's not talking about Israel. It's not talking about Israel, not talking about Zionism, being very explicit. Jews are the ones that love genocide. And this is from the group I mentioned before, GDL, Goyim Defense League. There's another group called White Lives Matter, another white supremacist group. No More Wars for Israel is something we see a lot in left-wing anti-war spaces, and they have taken that. Same thing with Jews and the AIPAC lobby control Congress and the Senate, this idea of Jewish control. So we see that, when Jews are attacked, everybody gets involved, the left, the right. As there's a famous song, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, up, down, right, left, and all around. That's what I always say when it comes to anti-Semitism. It also says wake up, right? This idea of wake up, similar to the noticing, like, look what's happening around you. The Jews are everywhere. And we're right here. Okay, so some takeaways. And again, sorry for a bit of my candor and my humor. It's been a long day. It's been a long 72 hours. So in all seriousness though, right? So the threat environment remains heightened. Contributing factors include normalization of tropes, existing vulnerabilities, and sometimes there's an extremist nexus. So, right, you can't always prove every incident of vandalism is from a white supremacist or an anti-Zionist group, but sometimes, like with the science in high school example, that there had to be someone who's deeply entrenched in anti-Semitic tropes. Hate crimes don't happen in a vacuum. They build off of tropes that are already normalized in society. I think that's what you were trying to say before about the normalization, whether it's politics or whatever it is, normalizing anything makes it more possible for other people to latch on. So hosting Nick Fuentes hosting a white supremacist on a podcast of a man who used to be on Fox News, right? Or even on Piers Morgan, which is more of all different types of people. It creates a normalization where people will say, oh, I don't know who that guy is. Let me Google him. And then that can send you down a rabbit hole. And the last thing I always say, and this is something that also comes from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, everyone always asks, is anti-Semitism worse on the right or the left? And I say that that's not a question, right? It's not about left or right. It's a virus, and it's something that mutates over time, place, and ideology, right? So many of the examples that we saw, we're thinking back to the BB drinking the blood. That's an example of anti-Semitism latching onto something. So that's a blood libel. We've seen the Middle Ages, and we're seeing it now too. It's not about left versus right. It's everywhere, and it latches on to certain things and certain movements. And I know, wow, we only have 10 minutes left, but I'm also happy to stick around a bit. But I just want to also say that ADL, we do a lot of work, Center on Extremism. We also do a lot of work. Happy to talk more about that as well. I realized we didn't talk so much about it. But yeah, I'm happy to chat.
Right.
Oh, someone in the back, yes.
So 2 questions really fast.
Hold on, what's your name?
Len.
Hi, Len.
So one is, what's the ADL doing about Candace Owens?
Yeah, happy to talk about that.
And I guess my second question is, all of this is important, obviously. Don't things like the Mamdani monitor kind of trivialize it?
The what? I'm sorry.
The ADL's particular website just about monitoring Zora Mamdani.
Okay, so first question about Candace Owens. So she's someone we also tracked, and again, I focus on anti-Zionism, and she also, frankly, is pretty anti-Zionist. All the things, Francophobic. Some might argue.
Yeah.
But yeah, Candace Owens is someone, right, we monitor, and we are, one thing we do, calling people out, or what we do as an organization, we write publications, we work with law enforcement, we work with elected officials, and we encourage them to call it out. We encourage people within their own parties to call out their own anti-Semitism. So in terms of what we're doing about Candace specifically, I don't know how much detail I can necessarily get into, and also I'm not the Candace person, I wish. But we definitely, she is someone who is of high concern to the agency. In terms of your second question, Mamdani Monitor, David, I think, could speak more to it, but I will say I don't believe it's a website. I think it's a newsletter or something. It's no?
I can.
Okay, cool.
So just to give a little bit of background for those of you who don't know, our leadership decided that because of Mayor-elect Mamdani's past comments, his past associations with problematic individuals, his own prescribing of why he got into politics, being the BDS movement, his founding of the SJP chapter, our leadership felt that we were in a unique moment that needed unique action. Our job is to track, to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. And so this was a unique moment, and they felt that it meant unique action. By the way,
But do you have a Musk monitor?
is Elon, to be candid, Elon Musk is not running the largest city with the largest Jewish population outside Israel.
But he's running the largest social media site in the universe.
That is fair. I think part of it was the feeling that, especially with his association with the DSA and their platform. And by the way, I could go into what happened at Park East and that abysmal statement that was made that did not even acknowledge the anti-Semitism. The problem that we have with this individual, with our mayor-elect, is there have been a number of times where there have been attempts by our own organization, by other mainstream Jewish organizations, to ask him to understand. And every time we've been met at best with apathy.
If I just a few words, and I know there could be a lot of questions about Mamdani and the Mamdani monitor, but I do think it also is worthwhile talking about things we learned today, and then have you take more questions on that as well. I will say though that I'm not in charge of policy. I'm not in charge. David and I were not in charge of communications, naming, frankly. But what I will say is that the example before about the Women's March, Tamika Mallory is an individual who's very involved in the aspect of kicking out Zionist women from the Women's March, and she was appointed to Mamdani's transition team. And that's something that's very concerning to us, right? So, but I will say, and I just want to clarify, as you asked about Candace Owens, right? If there's someone we suspect of anti-Semitism or suspect is connected to extremism, you better believe we're monitoring that. That's what I think. That's how I think I would respond. Yeah.
I just have a quick question about Mamdani.
Okay.
but I saw Jonathan Greenblatt right after he was elected, and the
Oh,
conversation, was about his prior remarks. And so the question was to Greenblatt, have you spoken with him?
right.
And he said he has not, at this time, he has not responded or reached out, although he had to other Jewish leaders. Has he yet reached out to Jonathan Greenblatt?
I don't know.
I do.
You don't, he is not. Okay, so, there, okay. Yeah, wait, I think, wait, I want to, has anyone who has not yet spoken yet have a question? Okay, no, that's, I love the frequent flyers, don't get me wrong. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance. Who's,
I saw.
Yeah, I just want to say that in
Yeah.
1985, I had a job at the ADL, my first job out of law
Oh.
school. One of the things I did was track anti-Semitism.
yeah.
I was not as busy as you folks, so I feel bad for you. I had a lot more free time. But my question is, and I know you're not psychologists, but why do you think there's been the spike? And why do you think that when one person does it make the other people emboldened, or is it contagious, or what do you?
So that's a really good question, and there's definitely polling. We actually have an institute at ADL called the Center on Anti-Semitism Research, which I know sounds redundant because everything, like, we all look at anti-Semitism, like, come on. But they focus more on like polling, and they poll people's attitudes, and they do more research in that. I think you're exactly on the nose, no pun intended. Like, I'm so sorry. Sorry. We're in a friendly crowd. I think that when somebody does an action, right, whether it's maybe a hand motion that looks like a sea Kyle, right, or when somebody says something, right, for example, last night, I believe it was JD Vance tweeted something along the lines of, like, it's not anti-Semitic to criticize, and something about Israel and it not being anti-Semitic, and then who quote tweeted him? Nick Fuentes, right? Nick Fuentes uplifted something and said, like, oh yeah, I agree with him on this. So again, it's not necessarily what Vance said, and again, I don't remember exactly, it itself might have not been inherently problematic, but when you're someone that high of a level, that can embolden other people to do things like that. I think it's true on all sides, similar with Mamdani, similar with other, name it, you name it. I think people, well, the rise in anti-Semitism, I think very obviously was October 7th. I think that it kind of, awakened something in people. And even now, right, we're in a post ceasefire kind of situation. And kind of sorry, it's unclear what's going on. Or at least in a, almost all of the hostages are home, and we're still seeing crazy things every single day. So it's like, how do you say, oh, it's just because of the war? No, it's something that was awakened within society, something that's, it's been there, right? Like I joined ADL 10 months before October 7th, specifically focusing on anti-Israel. And I saw crazy things, not to the scale, right? Not to the scale we're seeing it now, but it's always been there, right? So that's, I think, how I would answer that.
Right, we're gonna take one more, Ivan, because you haven't spoken much, and then you can.
I'll be around.
But we need to end at 8:30 officially.
So if we control the media, how come we're doing such a lousy job?
That's what I always say, right? Basically, no, seriously, we're so bad. The media, for real, I agree.
How do we get our message out?
How do we get our message out? I think it's important to, one of the big things is having allies and having people speak up with us and for us. Because if Jews keep saying over and over again, hey, everybody hates us, like, who's going to be listening? We need to make those kinds of relationships, partnerships. I think we need to get better. Not that we're a cabal or anything, but people need to get more savvy with social media. I think it's a huge thing. I think, right, like the TikTokification of everything. Like, I'm scrolling on TikTok, I'm looking at videos about Stranger Things and Taylor Swift, and all of a sudden, boom, someone's reading a letter by Osama bin Laden, and I'm like, where did I just land? I don't know. Some people might remember that. It was like 2 years ago. An Osama bin Laden letter went viral on TikTok. That was a little weird thing. So it's about, ADL, we work with social media companies about enforcing policies, but I think in terms of what we as a community could do is, right, like, explain to our friends who might not be so connected to the Jewish community of why this is so hard and problematic.
Alrighty, thank you so much to our guest speaker today. Reminder that next week there is a makeup class, so there is class next week. If you haven't already gotten your binders, if you're signed up for next session for the Maimonides class, Have a wonderful Hanukkah. We hope to see you on Friday night. We're having Shabbat dinner together, Hanukkah Shabbat dinner and services to follow with Stephanie the Shabbatones. It's gonna be an amazing night.
Next week is when we
Next
start.
week, no, next week is the last anti-Semitism class.
Oh, okay.
And then June 6th or 7th or whatever that Thursday is. January, yep, January 6th or 7th, whatever that Tuesday is, the first day of my Maimonides class.
And also, we will make sure to send a follow-up email for you all with resources from our website that we mentioned, and also happy to give out my email if anyone wants to stay in touch.
All right, goodbye to everyone on.